Okay, Star Wars The Old Republic has got a new expansion out. That's probably why you're here. There's a bit more buzz about the game. That's a weird game. I mean, MMO. Narrative RPG. Well, actually, it's both. And it's moved more in either direction in a few different ways over its life. But the latest expansion has sparked headlines like, Legacy of the Sith expansion has went down like the holiday special. That's from PC Gamer. So, ouch. Now, this sounded a massively ambitious expansion. It was massively opening up what advanced classes could basically play, each 1 through 50 origin story. They simplified some classes. They're allowing people to have 2 advanced classes on a character, revamping the UI, doing a bit of a revamp to the character creation, overhauling endgame gearing, and a whole bunch of other things. Plus, of course, a new story in the Republic and Empire War, one that's been ratcheting up big time and that is delivering a player fantasy that the past expansions sort of player alliance didn't. And it was hyped up as a big 10-year anniversary event, launching with an incredibly lavish cinematic, so people got excited. And maybe not for the best of reasons, because what did they get? Well, they got bugs. They got loads of bugs. The realization then that also much content is yet to come, and that the story that's here right now is 1 to 2 hours long per side. Some people doing it faster. Ouch. Yet for all of that, BioWare Austin are clearly trying to set this game up for the future, right? Like they're trying to make it a bit more accessible, to open up more role-playing options. They seem to be trying to bulk out the endgame a bit too. So, while all of this stuff is a big sting for the experienced players, that's almost certainly not who's going to be viewing this video. So the question then is, with 10 years of story content and a fresh set of changes, is now the perfect time to check out The Old Republic? Should you consider it in spite of the noise? Well, here is my initial journey. I began by making a new character, immediately jumping into the character creator. The UI and stuff like that's actually quite nice. I'm pretty sure it's been revamped. But still, the options do feel just a bit limited, and yeah, there is that kind of plasticky feel that you can get off some of the characters in this game. Now, the game actually offered to boost me right up to the latest content, so I decided to try that, even though, yes, I know that the Agent origin story is worth playing. Now, the new boost is to level 70, which is enough to get you into Onslaught and Legacy of the Sith, which are, of course, the 2 most recent expansions. You absolutely should not do this if you're new to the game, obviously, but, I mean, they clearly wanted me to go that way. It even glowed. It was glowing. It was just telling me, hey, do this boost. So I did. I mean, hell, they even made a story so far video on YouTube, probably because they know a bunch of people will be boosting. So, yeah, I watched that video. I'd say stop at 6 minutes 24 unless you want Onslaught stuff to be spoiled. Of course, I've actually played most of the content that was recapping, so the story, of course, made sense to me. So with that watched, and of course my advanced class selected, and again, it's actually quite nice the way that you can change up your origin story and then put in the different advanced classes. That's a really nice way to free up, like, player role-playing, give the players more choice. That's pretty sweet. But with that done, well, I was in the game, and immediately I noticed there's a new bar to the side of the screen. It's one that seems to be guiding me towards content. It's advertising cartel market things, which feels a bit off, and highlighting the new Galactic Seasons thing. Basically, it's a battle pass complete with a premium subscriber track. Look, that stuff's all beyond me right now, but it probably makes sense for a game with an endgame like the Old Republic's that is, not particularly rich in new content. So immediately, I found the quest to unlock my second advanced class. Now, this is a permanent choice, so if you do so, choose carefully. Look, more classes in one character I think is just brilliant, and also, for a role-playing game like this, I think it's a nice way for people to define who their character is. But anyway, back to playing. One quick look at the new ability tree, and I wasn't that overwhelmed, even with the boost. The pruning has definitely made it a bit easier to pick up. Yeah, though, loads of existing players are not particularly happy about this prune, so while it was fine for me, I can't begrudge them not really liking having some of their toys being taken away. Anyway, my marksmanship sniper was ready to go. And one immediate strange thing I noticed is the UI. I mean, the inventory screen is so high contrast, to the point of being uncomfortable to the eye. The character screen is better, it actually looks quite good, but it decreases my frame rate whenever it's there, and it actually stutters the game in general when it's on. It reduces the frame rate, and even when I scroll through my list of abilities in the abilities pane, every time I use the scroll wheel, the game lags, like frame rate drops. It's really strange. Anyway, time to quest, time to go through the story, and immediately I've got to side between the Republic or the Empire. Now, this is really cool, actually. It doesn't change my faction, but if I go Republic, then I'll be a SWTOR, because my character is an Empire agent. So that's pretty neat, and of course, yeah, Republic I go, because I think just being a SWTOR is a more interesting fantasy, so that's what I go for. I mean, so much of my time, so much of what I remember from being in the Empire is dealing with infighting, so why not stick it to them? Anyway, into the canteen I go, and I'm immediately playing a BioWare RPG. And that's a good thing. And between my voice acting and Jonas's opener, I wonder if we'll bang? It's a BioWare game. You can flirt with everyone, it feels. The next dialogue option then, of course, just offered a flirt, so confirming that possibility. The next odd thing I noticed then is how some of the chapters work, where I just click a button and bam, I'm teleported to the place of the story. It's handy, so I guess I'm not complaining. But I wonder if they're really trying to make it appeal to the not MMO crowd, just making it playable as a BioWare RPG, and certainly what I remember of Fallen Empire, yeah, it's very much playable to non-RPG people. So, now confirmed as a double agent, it's time to dip back into the Empire. And you know what? It's actually quite cool. Turns out there's a Dark Council member who's treating their troops like it's World War I, so out I go to stop her. Which is of course a neat prospect considering that I am a double agent waiting for the war to begin. So in a way, if she's going to be a useful idiot, well, that's kind of good for me. So with that, I'm off to the planet of Ossus, which is one of the Onslaught expansion planets, and immediately, yeah, it's apparent that the local Sith is a complete moron. So, strife, conflict, voice acting that's compelling, and I'm a double agent, so just before I go into the world proper, Jonas radios in and just says, hey, you want to sabotage some shit? It's a small but welcome touch, and I get a bonus objective to sabotage some ships. This setup is compelling. I'm not playing an MMO, I'm playing an RPG, and right now I'm pretty happy about that. Once in world then, I start to learn about how the Empire is working post-reforms and post-Fallen Empire, etc. storyline. It's all quite dramatic, it's well scored, it's well acted. It's a great way to get the player up to speed. It kind of feels like after the Valkorian stories, they are really feeling the need to re-establish the Republic versus Empire status quo. Soon then, I meet my new companion's main scout, and I'm starting to get into the groove. These are pretty damn well executed scenes. The camera is fairly dynamic. Like, effort has actually went in here. As I fight then, I notice I'm getting conquest points. Yeah, it turns out there's a whole system of like events, dailies, weeklies. Some of that ties into the galactic season, so if I get 25,000 personal conquest points, that will finish a daily, which will get my Underworld Syndicate plans, which are a resource for one of the events, that, and then also season points. So basically those conquest points earned during the event, they can give me rewards like armor and an XP boost, but then the season points, those go toward the galactic season battle pass thing. Definitely feels a bit free to play, but I guess they're just trying to work out how they can better reward players in a world where, they don't really seem to have a massive budget to make loads and loads of new content for this game, like you're getting a big Warcraft expansion. I suppose it's the best they can do with what they've got. Back to the game then. Look, I don't want to spoil the whole thing, so I'm just going to communicate my experience. What followed was a fun little adventure on this planet. And Ari's a great companion to have around. I mean, her voice acting performance is great. Maybe I just find, British agent-feeling characters, or, British commando-feeling characters. Maybe it reminds me of old war movies or something. I like it, but whatever. I enjoy my time with her. And the questing, I'd say it's fairly high effort. Now, it is the MMO usual. Absolutely, but there's plenty of voicing, and there's a level of execution and detail that just feels like an RPG. So, I'm going out, I scout a farm, I fight many droids, I fight Jedi, I have fun dialogue, a character that I didn't really expect shows up. And really, it's just a pretty high bar that continues. Now, gameplay-wise, I'll say it does get it takes a bit of getting used to. The marksman sniper felt off to me initially. The servers were a bit weird and laggy, even though my connection was fine, so that was a bit odd. But the core of this, like advanced class, basically just came down to having two main single target abilities that instantly refresh the cooldown of an instant ability, and then a double tap mechanic with snipe. It's not the most fun thing to play in the world, but it's the sort of thing where you get into the flow of the class's gameplay. It just doesn't feel as tight as other games I'm used to. The game feel is okay, but there's no Warcraft levels of responsiveness, there's no FF14 levels of flashiness. But after a while, I got into the groove, it does the job, and it at least did fulfill the fantasy of me being a sniper in a Star Wars game. So perhaps I'll warm to it more over time. Now, to do a little bit of spoilery talk so you can't skip through this, basically I go through the story, Darth Malgus ends up coming back, he gets rid of the Sith moron, though not actually, because she does return later on. And overall, it's just this nice little story. Eventually Malgus actually joins me as a companion. It's kind of cool. I end up getting way too aggressive in how I pull mobs, to the point where I actually die a whole bunch, and then I realize, oh, okay, maybe I should actually bother keybinding the second row of my action bar and playing this game properly. But I end up getting through that, and it's a story that's fun. It's more fun in the context of me being, of course, a saboteur, because I'm technically a member of the Empire, but I'm double agenting for the Republic, right? And I think that's just a cool player fantasy. So by the time I'm done with this story with Malgus, I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about it, because this is a game that just gives you great dialogue options. As an agent, I can be a total dickhead to people, but the sort of smooth, silky way that my character talks, it's just satisfying. I mean, lately I've been watching a whole bunch of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and there's characters like, say, Garrick, who's, a real fun spy character, and I'm not saying I'm getting one-to-one vibes or anything, but it's in the general wheelhouse, and it's something that I'm enjoying. So I finish my Empire story in this planet, and I return back to the Alliance base. It's time to debrief with my people, of course, only one of whom, she's one of the very important characters from the Fallen Empire, etc. saga, knows that I'm actually a saboteur. Now that actually creates a really fun narrative where most of my organization thinks I'm doing one thing, but in reality I'm actually helping the Republic. So then I get this pretty cool choice of, do I let my other right-hand guy, do I let him know that I'm a saboteur or not? I do end up letting him know, but I just really like the way that they've done this player fantasy, and from what I understand, you can basically play this story in 4 different ways. That's how you can get the replay value that will have some people saying that there's 6 to 8 hours of narrative content in this expansion, even though if you just go, say, Empire but Saboteur, that's one playthrough, that's maybe 2 to 3 hours. So that's kind of what's up there in terms of the story. But it's a story that I'm really enjoying, that I really like. And if I'm just playing this as an RPG because I'm undecided as to what the endgame is like, then that's more than enough for me to be happy with the cost of entry. So let's take it out here and let's have a bit of a chat about the game and the overall situation. So what's my takeaway from playing this slice of the game then? Actually, I'm decently excited to see what's next in this story, just to see how it goes. Having not been here for years, the Old Republic is a breath of fresh air. So at the very least, I'm going to get my 1 month of sub fee out of this game. Look, it might take a few weeks, but I am going to keep on playing just to see what this modified endgame is like. Till then, though, for me it's story time. Probably only an evening or two's worth. I mean, I've finished the first planet of Onslaught. I think I've got the last planet of Onslaught, and then Manan to do, and then that's me up to speed with the narrative. So that being said, let's zoom out again. Let's talk about Legacy of the Sith and just what the hell is going on with this game. So I'm having a good enough time, but how has this expansion and situation actually went down? Well, to say that it's been controversial, I think would be an understatement. So I asked people on Twitter, and mostly negative. I searched for reviews, mostly negative to mixed. I looked at forums, mostly critical. So, ouch. Their hyping of this being a big, 10-year anniversary just seems to have made it sting even more. So, why? Well, first, content length. A few of their recent stories have been short, but this one, I think the community basically thinks it's taking the piss. Doing them properly with no rushing is 1 to 2 hours per site. Some people are getting it even shorter. And that is really rough for something that they are labeling as an expansion. Then, what's worse is the likes of the new daily zone, well, that's not even here yet. That's in an upcoming patch, which basically just makes this expansion feel like a game update. It feels like a patch, not an expansion. Then there's the UI, and yeah, impressions are mixed. They try to go a bit more minimal, I think they try to be a bit more clear, but there's some examples like icons that are now grayscaled, and people don't know if that's a bug or not, but they seem to be replacing icons that were a lot more rich and had more identity. You hit the inventory button, and it basically feels like you've turned Windows onto high contrast mode. It hurts my eyes. So opinions of the UI are mixed, generally not really skewing that positive though. Now there's some great things like the loadouts, that's fantastic, very handy. Being able to have multiple combat styles, well, 2 on a character, that's good. But even then, the cost that came with that is a bit mixed, and it's something that I think my fellow WoW players are going to know quite well. Ability pruning. So some spells have been removed. Others are now a level-based choice, like choosing between World of Warcraft talents. Now this has meant that it's definitely less overwhelming to new players or a lapsed player like me, so it actually feels quite good for me. But I mean, there's no doubt that loads of people are having their classes that they played at endgame and mastered, they're having those change in a way that they don't enjoy. So what BioWare's done there, it's playing with fire. What else? Well, bugs, including ones that seemingly took out the latest Flashpoint. Another example then is some of the content that progresses you towards the new legendary implants would basically have an issue where running the content wouldn't always give you credit. Just bugs like that that really shouldn't happen. I mean, stuff like that is just terrible. And seeing them for the launch of what they're calling an expansion, one where many of these issues were actually found in the January test build, that's just not acceptable. Really, this already delayed expansion just should have been delayed further. Hell, I'd say they probably should have delayed this enough to have actually included the daily stuff and the operation from launch. An expansion just shouldn't feel like this. With the general lack of content, I would have really thought it just would have needed a lot more story to make people happy. It's typical Electronic Arts decision-making, to be honest. They half-killed previous BioWare products, Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda, by pushing them out too early. Previous DICE products, Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 2042. It's just all these shenanigans again. Look, first impressions matter, and so do last impressions. The last time I played FF14, I felt happy. That's good. But if somebody gets frustrated at a loss of progress, or maybe they run out of content, an expansion doesn't meet their expectations, then the last memory of their game is going to be a negative one, and that means that it won't matter how good the new daily zone is or anything like that, because the last thing in their head about this game will be negative. So this is baffling decision-making. It's clear that this team just did not have the time to do what they needed to do. And, I mean, with the other BioWare Austin project, Anthem Next, being cancelled, I would have hoped that the Old Republic would have got more resources, that they would start to get Knights of the Fallen Empire-sized expansions that maybe had more endgame stuff as well. Who knows? I don't know BioWare as a company like I know Blizzard, so it would be foolish to speculate, but certainly let me know if you've got an insight here. I mean, ultimately, for I see it, 6.0 came with 2 planets. It didn't have a massive story, but it was longer from what I understand. There was daily zones, there was more exploration content. But here, Manan, from everything I hear, like, it doesn't have the exploration. It's just the linear story. It's very shallow, and I think if you're comparing 6.0 to 7.0, well, comparing's not even fair. This should not have been called an expansion. Let me know if you have any insight, but suffice to say, if you're a bleeding edge SWTOR player, I don't really think this has a lot for you, other than perhaps the new endgame gearing, which you might like. So, okay, you and your companions reach level 50 through your story, and then that just carried on for the next few expansions. Then, the 2 Valkyrian expansions happened. Now, these were the ones that came out with those massive, big, lavish CG trailers. They had a fairly long story, and they represented BioWare's push towards the narrative RPG side of the game even more. Now, all of the story in those 2, Valkyrian expansions, that kind of came at the cost of other content. So that ended up splitting fans, but it did at least attract new players. Well, after that, those new players got shorter expansions with the likes of Onslaught and now Legacy of the Sith. But at least Onslaught and Legacy of the Sith are trying to bulk out the endgame progression a little bit more from what I understand. So that means this game has got a bit of a mixed identity, and BioWare, they're still pushing the narrative RPG angle in their marketing, but then Legacy of the Sith is just not delivering those goods. It's that weird situation of, compared to those, say Fallen Empire or whatever, this launched with a big lavish CG trailer. People perhaps expected more because that quest content was not on the public test server, and they've not got that. So it even seems that BioWare have messed up the expectation management of people, which has made that launch day revelation sting even more. What does that mean then? Well, it means that this game is just a whole bag of worms for existing players, because you've got the players who really like the game sort of pre-Valkyrian, and you've got the players who came in, really enjoyed those 2 expansions with all the narrative content that they had. Then you've got the players who are, perhaps more enjoying the endgame setup of a 6.0, 7.0 style. But there's a fair few different styles of experience that they've ended up creating here. Now, I think it overall means that if you're not an existing player of this game, if you're completely fresh, then you've got 8 origin stories plus all the expansions. That is a hell of a lot of content. So the answer to the should you play question is, I would say, absolutely if you're new. If you're new, but you're not tied down to Star Wars, I'd say still give it a shot. Maybe try the Sith Warrior or Agent storylines. I think those are, they're just a little bit more interesting just because of the way the Empire works. They just have more squabbling and there's more narrative opportunities, whereas the Republic tend to be just a bit more sort of cliche or straightforward. Now, while the combat in this game is not groundbreaking and the graphics are certainly a bit odd, I would say that the mountains and mountains of well-executed narrative content makes it a no-brainer. Now, for me, it's never hit the heights of Heavensward, Shadowbringers, or Endwalker, but I will say that it does provide a remarkably smooth, well-paced storyline that is absolutely worth checking out, and doubly so if it's a world that you are invested in. If you're a Star Wars fan, this game is an absolute no-brainer. For me, I'm going to slowly work my way toward max level so I can evaluate the Old Republic once I get to the end game, and I can actually understand how that plays. Till then, though, I'll say that I'm happy to play it as a single-player RPG, and I think you probably will be as well. That said, I don't like how the devs have communicated. I just don't really like the general vibe that's went on here. It doesn't feel like people have really got what they were led to expect. And that does make me uncomfortable, meaning I do have to end this video on a little bit of a sour note, or at least with a little bit of a question mark or a suspicion. They have talked up this being a year that is celebrating the decade of this game. It hasn't got off to a great start, but perhaps they can redeem themselves if the full year actually delivers. So, I'll update you when the time is right. That's it for now. Subscribe to the channel for more MMO content, and I'll see you next time.